Yeah, you should be able to, Renata. Can you hear me okay? Welcome everybody that's joining us. We're just about to get started.
Yes, so how am I going to give it back to you? Let's see, is it right above my name? Or thank you, co-host. Uh, and spotlight hit. I don't see it, Julie.
I'll just claim it back. It's okay. I'll make
Okay,
you
I'm
co-host.
sorry. I'm trying to see, can I do it down here? Okay, well, we're going to start. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone that's here and everyone that we expect. We have a wonderful program for you. My name is Renata Valree. I am the Executive Director of Peace and Education, and this is our launch for our Peace of Mind lecture series. We have a wonderful speaker here tonight. I think it's really important that we open ourselves up to hear and learn everything James has to offer. And we also do some self-reflection as he goes through his different areas of focus that he's going to talk about. It's going to be dynamic. I know him. He's a great person. Um, our conversation really is an invitation for all of us to reflect on that very essential question of what does it really take to build peace in divided communities, and how do our community members see us as peace builders? And so the work of mediation is not only about techniques and processes, it's also about character, authenticity, and integrity of the mediator or the facilitator, depending on which role you're sitting in. So who are we in the room matters as much to the community as what we do. So how we represent ourselves, the community's perception of who we are, is as important as the work we do. But before I introduce this dynamic speaker, I'm going to hand it over to Julie. She has a few things she'd like to share with you all. And Julie Ali is our Assistant Executive Director. So Julie, there you are. Okay, hand it over to
Thank,
you.
thank you, Renata. So like Renata shared, it's our pleasure to welcome James, who we had the blessing to work with probably for what now, probably the last 3 or 4 years, in partnership with the Department of Justice, as he was a former conciliator there. And learned a lot from each other, learned a lot through the work. And I'm excited about what he has to share tonight. I will share some things at the end about current projects that we have. Over the last year, most of the work we've been doing has been focusing around the LA fires and the trust network, which is being developed as an early warning, early action system. There's some updates to that. So I'll share that at the end in case anybody's interested. And anything that James wants to share at the end, he's welcome to do so too. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Julie. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, James Williams. James brings a wealth of experience and insight into the practice of peace building, from mediating to conciliating to civic engagement to outreach. He has done it all. He's fantastic. He's really a true expert in helping communities and individuals navigate conflict. Not to mention, he's a great trainer. We've had him for training for our grad students, including myself and some others that, people still talk about the amazing training that he presented for us. But he's a genuinely kind person and very committed to bringing peace, but more so to getting people to a point of understanding and respect. So I am grateful to be able to share this space with you tonight. And I am so optimistic that you all are going to have a fantastic time. And I want to say welcome to all of you. And I'm going to introduce you to James. And James, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? We're good? Okay. I see a couple of nods. I'm a roll with that. My voice is coming through. It is my distinct pleasure to be present and share this time and space with you. I'm grateful for this opportunity from Peace and Education. They have been a wonderful partner in working with an organization I used to work uh, with the Community Relations Service. And when they asked on, I'm new to LinkedIn and I'm new to a lot of things in terms of the work, and I'm learning again. It's really exciting to be reconnecting in a different way with the mediation and the alternative dispute resolution community, the community problem solving and peacemaking communities as an independent now. And in doing so, when they said, "Hey, we're looking for speakers," I said, "Ooh, I definitely want to be a part of this. I want to support y'all in any way that I can, particularly with it starting in the middle of Women's History Month, coming right out of African World History Month into Women's Month, to really look at, for me, my love of learning and dealing with authenticity and integrity. My first lessons have always brought to me by women and have always helped me to see myself clearly. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity and to not, contextually, I would not have the skill set that I have or the kind words that Renata and Julie shared about me and our shared interactions. I have the good fortune of having some of the women that directly impacted my life and changed it for the better, who are in the room. I can't see everyone, so I'm not going to call any names, but I do know that you're here, and I got a quick glance, was able to see you, and hopefully we'll have a chance to share briefly at the end, and I will most likely name y'all because it's important that while I'm grateful for this time to share what I have gotten. I also would like for you to see the amazing women that made it possible for me to be, and some of them are in the room. And I'd like to give, first off, personal shout out to Dr. Pamela Cooper Lee Porter, who was my Jegna through all the years when I was a very young man, and the librarians at what is now called B.B. Moore Campbell View Park Library, who helped to foster my learning and started me on this journey towards peacemaking. And I call it almost like peace mongering, waging peace. And with that said, let's jump right in. For those of you that this is your first time meeting me, I will say this. I may ask some questions. They aren't necessarily rhetorical. In this piece, it's presented as questions to give us a more colloquial feel, as a way for us to directly engage. I would please ask that you hold the questions until the end. However, if it's a burning question, put it in the chat, please, and then we'll get it bubbled up. The only question that I have, and I want to just raise this from the very beginning, because we're online, I want you to understand we have what we call the law of 2 feet. And so what that means is for the most part is I want you to get your needs met so that if we're moving and we're grooving and your body is saying, "Hey, I need to make a quick biological break for myself," please do. Find a way to take us with you and stay engaged. And with that, let's get going. We're going to be talking about authenticity and integrity in mediation. Now, I've been a mediator in community for probably the last 40 years. So here's our adumbration. All right. And that's one of my favorite words. And it has a loose definition underneath it. What I want you to also think about is here's what we're going to be talking about during our time together. What you'll also get is that if you ever have trained with me or worked with me, is that I trust that you have amazing capabilities to not only read, but to read with comprehension. So that I'm not going to be reading everything that is on the screen before you, but I do want you to have the opportunity to here are some of the main or the key points here. These are our guide rails for our conversation, our time this evening. I want to thank you all for being here. And one of the main things about the adumbration that, because I want to peel this back, because what I want to talk about in terms of mediation is some of the things that we don't always talk about. If we're going to talk about authenticity, we're going to talk about integrity. Well, we want to set the context for what that means. We're going to talk about, where you would need that and why is that important, particularly if we're responding to a major crisis or a major critical incident in your community. And we're talking about this at the community level. Okay, we're not talking about one individual or two small parties. We're looking at this at a community-wide level. It may at some point be a couple of individuals, two organizations even. And then we want to get into the mediator role, function, and scope because we want you to understand. I want to talk about how we look at what a mediator is and what that really means. And then when we get to community problem solving and community action, community potential solutions, resolutions, and processes, I like to use what's called an ABCD approach, which is an asset-based community development approach. And we'll get into what that means very quickly. My goal is to not have us get deep in the weeds. I do, however, like for us to get our toes wet at the ocean of our understanding. So we'll have an opportunity to do that. And then we'll talk about why it's important to increase rapport, cultivate trust, and build capacity. And then we'll talk about transitions and questions. And transitions and questions will be towards the end of our time together. And hopefully everyone is able to hear me well. We have what we need, and let's buckle up for safety and let's get ready to go. Everybody good so far? Thumbs up? Okay. I can't see every thumb, but if you can use your thumbs up on your device, that would be awesome. Thank y'all so much. Appreciate it. So here we go. So in setting the context, we want to be able to answer these questions when we're responding to an incident where our services are needed. And these are things that we need to know before we get there. Who are you? And I know it seems kind of banal, but I mean, who are you in a whole person context? In terms of when you see this young man, or, I still see myself as a young man, even with all the white hair. When you see this young man, you may only see me, but you may not see that I walked into the space with my ancestors. I walk into the space with all the people that poured into me. So you may see a singular individual. However, I walk in carrying all the legions, all the scholars, all the brilliant folks that helped me and brought me in the years of practice and experience that brought me to the moment that we meet. And I'm representing all of those folks, as well as you see in the lower corner there, I'm representing JAW Consulting, or I'm representing this agency, or I'm a member of NAFCOM, and I'm representing NAFCOM or ACR, or this particular entity that is going to be aiding you in resolving this particular issue. Okay. Well, what does that mean? And when I say who do you represent, what does that mean? Because our goal for many, and then it gets into what can you do? And this is about personal power. And when I talk about personal power, it means that we're talking about alternative dispute resolution, problem solving, all of the aspects that get into community troubleshooting and problem solving and peacemaking, not merely when we're at the mediation table. Because we all sit in many houses, right? You may belong to a fraternity or sorority. You may belong to a civic organization. You may belong to a sports organization. You may have a particular hobby. You may be in a particular martial arts association or a group or a yoga group. You may have, so these are all things that are directly related to how you are going to be showing up for the people that you're going to be meeting. And in doing so, as a quick example, so I have, growing up, I was ordained in the Christian faith. I have studied intensely multiple religions, Western and indigenous, African, and the kind of the big three as well, and then some of the other huge ones. And it affords me an opportunity to now, when we come and we sit down, when we're looking at a model for what we are going to provide this community to resolve the solution, when I talk about who I represent, it now becomes, how would you like for us to do this? Are we going to sit in a circle? What does your community need in this? What can I do? Right? And then now that we get our contexts together, and we're going to be moving quickly because really, I want to use our adumbration as a way to frame a little bit of a discussion for us at the end in the event you have any questions about how this all applies to mediation, how this authenticity, this integrity really applies. Because the main thing we're looking at now is there's been a major crisis, a critical incident. We've answered the questions from the previous slide. And now it's like, well, why are you there? And I don't mean you as an agency or some representative of an agency, but they chose to send you. Why? And whether or not the people that you're working with ask that question directly to you, your behavior when you get there with them is going to indicate the answer to it. And so what I mean is a lot of times with the previous situation where I worked, when we responded, and I used to share this with my colleagues, we used to have fun talking about these more praxis related questions, is somebody's job is on the line when we walk up. And we're talking about person could be the chief of police, it could be particular officers, it could be the mayor, it could be a local congressperson, state senator, or state representative, or it could be some of their community members, a community organization. So when we get there, somebody's job is on the line in the balance. Hey, the superintendent of schools, teachers, principals, all of these things are at play. And the main thing is when I'm saying how can you help, I want you to think about it's a critical incident. Someone's job is on the line. How can you help? First thing you can do is to help them see the situation clearly, right? And how can you help? Remember, most folk are going to be calling, offering their services because it's a big giant metaphoric fire. Everybody that has any idea on how to put it out is going to be calling. How can you help? And not how can you help in a few minutes or in the next week? How can you help them right now? In the next 5 minutes, what can you do? When you walk in with them and you've listened and you've done your pre-work, what is it that you perceive? Notice I didn't say see. I said, what do you perceive? Because we want to be able to use all of our faculties as a human being when we're walking into these spaces. And so that means that am I paying attention to the vibe of the room? And I'm not going to get all woo-woo, but I want you to think about what is the vibe like in this? How does it feel? What is the tension in this space? Is what I'm really saying. Is it so palpable that you could cut it? Is it thick? How would you describe it? How are people responding to your presence? Are there people whispering? Are they talking in the side? Are they seeking you? How are they looking at you? And what is your response to them? What are you perceiving? Is there a particular smell when you get there? And I'll give you an example. I responded, was one of the folks that had the opportunity to respond to Hurricane Katrina. And I spent some time in Atlanta, and we trained some folks with the American Red Cross, and we're responding. And then I was on the ground in both theaters of action in Mississippi, Alabama, and I was in Louisiana. And while I was in Louisiana, there were folks that were staying in Baton Rouge at a particular large, I'll say it's an amphitheater, but a large civic center. And I remember what that smelled like as I walked up to it. Just imagine having several thousand human beings eating, sleeping, showering, bathing, cleaning, and living in a particular space for a few days. It's not, just I'll never forget that, but it's like I remember that so that when I'm working with the folks, at the top of my mind is what can I do to ease what's happening with them? How can I let them know that I'm listening fully, that they are not just being heard, they're being listened to? We good? I'm going to move on. All right, so now we get there and they agree that they're going to work with us. And so now, what is our role, function, and scope as a mediator? And I put ask the powerful question as the main thing you want to be able to do, because that's going to come out of your perception of what you're perceiving. But mainly, we're going to talk about a concept known as identity management, which is what I was a brilliant man that I used to work with named Ronald Wakabayashi exposed me to this process, talked about it. And it's just a way of when I enter the room, well, when I first entered the room, you'd see a young man. Now I'm noticing that people don't respond to me as a young man. I see all this white hair. So they start thinking I'm old. Okay, first off, white and gray don't mean the same thing. Okay, I get a little touchy about that. But I want you to think about I am a fairly loquacious black man with white facial hair and glasses. And when I talk about it, I share that I went to a small liberal arts college in Los Angeles because I don't want people focusing on where I went to school at the start. I want to be able to manage my identity. I want to be able to not talk about everything about me because we're responding to a crisis. What you need to know is that I'm very well qualified to be here, despite what you may see, whatever judgments you may have about me. Today, you see, I have on a multicolored shirt with a beautiful pattern, and I'm not necessarily in a button-down shirt with a tie, jacket, and coat. So, what does that say about me? Are there going to be assumptions that you're going to be making about me when you see me the way that you do? The way that I speak the language. Are there assumptions that you're making about me and my capabilities and the quality of what my work may look like? Now we want to get to, as we're doing this and we're meeting these folks and deciding how we can help, and they're deciding whether they want our help, we want to cultivate brave spaces. And by this, I mean that I lead in this, and I lead and share, saying things that I don't want a safe space. And the reason I don't want a safe space is because I need to be courageous. That in dealing with the systems and institutions that I have dealt with, safety has never been a part of my everyday reality. Safe is not something that I have been afforded. The people in the community have not been afforded safety. So to say that I'm given a safe space is, in my humble perspective, is a bit of an illusion or delusion or a play at a feeling that is illusory or at temporary, as opposed to working with us to cultivate a brave space where courage is required because we're doing things that we haven't done before, because we're seeking to build relationships and to go places that we have not fully been consistently. And we want to cultivate, and I use the word cultivate because it implies that there's a lot of work involved. Cultivation requires work. You think you're breaking up the land and you're doing those sorts of, I really work hard with the word selection so that to invoke and to evoke what we're going to be talking about. And the other thing I like to is that within that identity management, a lot of what you see may not necessarily be what it is. So there are times, and many of you that know me will see that I dress a certain way. I cultivate a particular imagery of how I desire to be seen. And at times, what that means is, and you see, I have the word flex there. I like to use the appropriate vernacular English at times. And so there are times when flex is just a way to help remind people, will say that I am qualified, and that there may be times when, based on how you see me, you may feel that you need my resume before you can deem me qualified. And sometimes I may need to flex that, as you saw from the very beginning. The first slide we got, it had the word adumbration on it. And so that's one of the things that I borrowed from one of my elders as a way to begin to subtly flex, either using language or using attire. And I'm not saying that I dress in a way that is not my authentic self, but I want to dress in a way that says that I'm serious about what's happening. I'm a person of trust. We're able to be serious with one another, but we're also able to build a camaraderie that allows you to be courageous enough to talk about what the real issues are that are present, and not talk around and dance around, because we don't really have a lot of time. And the flexing is going to come when it's time for you to ask the question, because as a mediator, we're typically described as independent, third party, neutral, right? So most times we're not independent. We're connected to someone. We are a third party, so that part is absolutely true. I like to use the phrase fair or just. Actually, not just, more fair. Uh, I don't like to say neutral because I'm not. As you've heard me, you've heard of myself as a peacemaker. Okay, that means that I've made some decisions on what it is that I'm talking about, what I see as potential outcomes. And I'm not going to step away from those things. And in terms of what I mean by when to flex, it may be that someone may need your bona fides. And I'm starting to learn that, and again, for those of you, I'm new to LinkedIn and I'm still trying to build out my profile around, oh, wow, you got to do this. And so you're checking out those things, so that what I've learned through 25 years of working with the federal government is many of us do not know how to appropriately talk about ourselves. Okay. And when we're doing this identity management, there are times that I may seem assertive and it may be described as arrogant. Or I may show emotion and high passion, and some may see that as aggression or anger or violent, even though it's really just high passion. And so, in terms of that flex, what I need to be able to do is to use words to work with folks so that they have an opportunity to see the real me. So, am I there early when stuff is happening? Yes, I am. I'm there early. I leave late. I'm hanging out in the parking lot. I'm helping them clean up. I'm helping them sweep. And this is something I would do if I was there just being me. So it's not as if it's a ruse, we'll say, or I want to say manipulation, but folks tend to look at that word negatively, and I don't mean it in that way. But I mean it in, I want to be around so that when you are ready to actually have real conversation, I am present. And one of my elders, Borden Olive, BO, used to really talk about that is, you have the meeting, then the meeting after the meeting, and sometimes the meeting after the meeting. And that's where you start to flex. And then you find out that, well, I left a PhD program. And when I say Master Science in Applied Demography, all but thesis, it's because, I actually did all the work for the degree, but I left due to some extenuating circumstances. It also says that, I also spent 9 years in school, that I know what I'm talking about, and that as I came to you, here are the ways that I can help you. I was an assistant dean for black students at a major, at a small liberal arts college. Whereas now I would say, and I say, well, I was at the University of Southern California. And, and then they would say, so now we have a different relationship. And some people may look at me a little differently. And in some spaces, I say University of South Central, because again, we're talking that vernacular because it is actually just a little bit west of South Central where it used to be. And so you get USC either way. That being said, I'm very proud of the time and the work that I spent there. And it was really helpful in me learning about how structural and institutional power gets wielded and implemented. And so with that, we now are able to look at ourselves. And that's what this identity management, cultivating the brave space and the when to flex is really about for you. It's about letting the parties that you're working with get to know you. And what I mean is with transparency. I had the good fortune of when I was working to travel the country, to work in all, rural areas, to work in urban areas in the Midwest and the South and the East Coast. Don't leave anywhere out. Alaska and Hawaii and Guam, the islands as well, as well as some of the indigenous communities. So if you walk in there to these places and you're not presenting your true self, people are going to know. My elders taught me that a phrase is good character shines through. So, and there were folks who would not accept me at the beginning. They were uncomfortable, and I was like, that's okay. You have every right to be. You just met me 5 minutes ago. I get it. However, I am going to demonstrate to you why I'm here, and I'm not just here because a job sent me here. I'm here because I'm good at what I do. You need what I have to offer. And I'm not saying I'm here to force anything on you, but I want you to think about what it is that I have to offer and see if it doesn't fit the needs that you're talking about based on what you told me in our conversation. Hit this next slide and you'll see. Now we get to what's called an ABCD approach, called an asset-based community development model. It is a model that is basically set up to design to aid you in looking at whatever community you get into as we're meeting with those parties and looking at potential solutions, and you're doing your pre-work and you're working with them as we're getting to know them. You're seeing what are they already doing? What are they already building? What have they already built? What are the systems and structures they already have in place? Because I'm going to tell to you very simply, these are assets that already have a budget line item, that already have institutional commitment and support behind them, and affords us an opportunity to rapidly put something in place because it already exists. It may just need some tweaks and some additional support, but it's already there. And here's how that supports your integrity and authenticity. You're honest enough to not say, well, I got my own programs and my own tools. You're willing to be honest enough to say, I got stuff, but let's look at what you already have and see if we can make that work and just add some things. Let's see how you are using the resources that you have at your disposal already. And as many of you have responded to communities in crisis, communities in conflict, one of the reasons they're in conflict is because it's about these resources and how they're being utilized. So for you to reflect back to the people what they already see, that supports your integrity. That's what is supporting your authenticity. And we typically refer to that in the parlance as talking about providing a mirror so that the parties, you're giving back to the parties what they see. You're not answering for them. You're just helping them see what is theirs more clearly. What are you doing with this empty lot? What kind of programs do you have that's going on at the community center? And while you're having those conversations, those real conversations at a particular place as you're eating, because you got to eat wherever you go. You got to get something to drink, non-alcoholic, wherever you go. Or you need to have your intervention tool at a place, and having it at a particular place may have a particular history with peacemaking. It may also have a particular group that is connected to peacemaking, and they, different interfaith communities, as an example. I love when I would work with the Sikh community because, well, being vegan, having the food at the Sikh community was amazing. And so imagine now we're sitting and we're talking and we're working through these issues, and we work through the issues, and now we're breaking bread. And we haven't finished working through everything, but we're breaking bread and we're eating together. And we're in the process of doing these things and identifying ways that we might be able to work together on something you already have built. Now we can talk about how we can build capacity, how y'all can do this. And once we're done with my part, you can keep on going and I don't have to be there. You don't really need me in anymore. How we doing? We good, everybody? Thumbs up. All right. I got a couple more slides, and then everybody, all of us get together and share and hopefully talk. Because now we get this rapport increasing, and it comes right back to you again. Who are you? Because these folks may have some very specific needs. And when I say, who are you? I would say, I know that a couple of my sisters are in the room. I hope they don't mind me using their names. But Linda Ortiz and Mildred Dupree Robles are in the room. And these are two of the most amazing women that walk the face of the earth. And so when we talk about who are you, so that when you see me, you don't know it, but you've met them. You've met these amazing women because you see me. And some of the ways and things that they've taught me around how my role in this particular space may fit. You got to look at, how do you fit here? What is needed from you? And not how much of you is needed, because we don't, again, as mediators, we're not there to take over. We're there to be the cheerleader, the supporter. And when I say cheerleader, what I mean is we're there to help the parties feel better about the solutions that they bring to themselves. We're not there to take sides. Just so we're clear, I want to make sure we don't not get down in that. Okay. And then more importantly, where is your perspective in this? And what is your perspective as you're helping people? Who are you? And when I say who are you in this role, I mean as a human being, as a person walking around, not what title you wear, not what job you do. Who are you? What can you tell folks about yourself other than the kind of work that you do? We're very work job defined in this American culture. And many times that is a shield that people put up, but I don't trust a job title. I trust character. I trust consistency, transparency, right? Somebody who does what they say they're going to do. So when we engage, and when I say someone that does what they say they're going to do, I'm not looking for a 10 out of 10. We're looking for an 8.5 out of 10, 9 out of 10 best. Okay. And the other piece that I want you to really get at is this. I want you to hear the passion that I have about mediation and community problem solving, the passion that I feel about the love for the people and how the people can solve their problems with our support and assistance. And it's support and assistance because we're really providing a process as mediators. And I'm not going to get deep into the whole mediation or facilitation process. And y'all know that. And for those of you that don't, holler at me. I can teach you a class about it and we can get it going either for your community about how to run effective meetings. And those things are important. But most importantly, your perspective on that is important. By perspective, I mean, do you really believe that the people can do this? And I don't just mean believe at this point, because I mean, beliefs are something that people, I know the people can do it. It's not about belief anymore. I've got knowledge and experience. So for me to say something other than that would not be truthful. This is what we're talking about. And so now, knowing that this is how I'm coming through, what is it about the role that I'm filling right now that's going to work in this particular venue, in this particular situation? I've been places where I'm brand new and there are people older than me that are, hey, big brother, we have some ideas that we'd like you to resolve. And because we're not at the mediation table yet, we're still working out how the parties are going to work through. We're helping them to refine their issues and concerns in this priest perspective. They want some assistance. And that's what, as a mediator, you provide to them. Help them to identify what their core concerns and issues are. Help them see some things about themselves that they may not be seeing as you see them. Talking to the folks in all those different organizations. Now, they may be looking differently at their own organization. And your abilities, your history, your experiences that you bring to this situation aid the parties in how they see themselves. And I know we don't always talk about it this way because we want to minimize the role of mediator. And I'm not trying to maximize the role of mediator, but I do want you to see that your role is important. I do want you to acknowledge that asking the right question is important. The key question, the one that people are afraid to ask, that's your role. And particularly in a critical incident or a major crisis, you have to do that. You have to. And what I mean by have to is that sometimes, and I've said this to the parties with me, it's not a choice. I have to say this. You all can deal with it how you choose to deal with it, but this is going to be said. All right? And now that we've got to this point, we've actually been able to come up with some potential solutions. We've mediated, we've chatted, we've talked, we've got a whole agreement plan. But in this agreement that's planned, in this solution, ideally, when we do this, it's forward thinking. And the way in which I try to work is that it's a transformative process. It's a transformative mediation, meaning that whether we get assigned mediation or not, these people in this community are going to be working together after this process is done. Going forward, are they going to build? Is there some activity that they built in to address their issues? Is there a solution? Are there additional meetings needed? What does that look like? What are we planning to do? Do we need some additional training for these folks so that they can run? We built this big, wonderful collaboration to resolve these issues. And through the collaboration, we were able to get this mediation. And that's there. But now we need to keep meeting for a little while to manage this shared activity that we are building in this solution, this tool that we've used, that we built. Who's going to facilitate the meetings now? Who's going to do the notes? Who's going to do this work? Well, as mediator or problem solver, depending upon your role, your organization, that and the other, this is when you start looking at, well, you know, That's not what we do. Maybe we need to call Jaw Consulting or JW Consulting and have them teach these folks how to run an effective meeting. Teach them how to structure and set up the meeting. Give them the handbook so that they now know, well, once this is done, how are we going to evaluate this? Because now we're looking at a change management process. And I'm not going to get deep in the woods on change management. That's a whole lecture in and of itself. But once you think about change management in the terms of it's a process that can take 8 to 12 years when committed. 8 on the fast end, 12 on the back end, but still there's a lot of buy-in and commitment from an organization to change based on the resolution that we have agreed to. Okay. Most government cycles for government workers in terms of elected officials or chiefs of police or superintendents and principals last a little longer, but superintendents, it's not 8 years, is it? It's not 8 to 12 years. So now what we're looking at with these folks is, can you sustain your your ad hoc organization, make it more formal if need be, or what are you doing so that it can continue and go forward? How have you left these parties so that they can do it? In other words, have you built the capacity for them? And that's what we're talking about here is this capacity building. Because they're going to look at you like, well, we're grateful that you came and we got this stuff done, but we wouldn't be meeting with these people if you didn't come here. So you don't just up and leave them now that the mediation is done. And I'm phrasing that, and that's what I do. I don't leave once the mediation is done. We want to see some parts of it implemented so that we can then teach them how to run those meetings and how to manage the project that they have created as a solution to move forward. And we train them in how to do that. And if they need us, then we know how to come back. And the reason why your authenticity and your integrity is important is because if folks know about the Gordian knot, y'all familiar? Yes? Okay. If not, no pun intended. The Gordian knot is basically seen as something that is intractable. You can't unravel it. And that's where you get what we call here the impatapo, the knot beneath my name, JW the Consulting. And this is where we're gonna end, and then we're gonna talk about our questions. From this Gordian knot of discord emerges the smooth knot of resolution, binding the group to their shared resolution and or peace. And what we want to be able to do is to take these tangling and these jagged edges and to make them smooth. And by us, we're not making them smooth. We're utilizing the process that aids them in doing it themselves. And that is what is the most important thing, is that when they look at you, they can say, thank you for helping us. They can see what you did. They can see that you're committed to them with the process. You're not committed to your tools. You're not committed to even the process of mediation. Maybe they don't get a signed document. Maybe everybody can't sign, but they still believe in enforcing or manifesting what they agreed to do, even though it's not signed. We want to transform these communities. And that's the beauty of when you begin working on you, seeing yourself more fully and clearly, what you bring to the table, how you are managing your identity, how you are dealing with the communities that you serve and all the houses within which you reside. When you bring all those to the table to aid communities in conflict, they will remember you for how you helped them see themselves, how you helped them through the difficult times, through the times when they didn't have much hope, times that they were concerned, they were worried, their jobs were on the line, to now where you may have saved jobs, saved money for this community, able to, through the course of this process, bring in grants and really transform a neighborhood. You didn't do it, they did the work. And I want to just say that this is a lot of what I'm describing here is a lot of what many folks refer to as in athletics, you'd call it a flow state. This is something that I really adhere to very strongly is you have everything that you need. The parties and you and your skill sets, you have everything that you need right there with you. You just have to be able to breathe fully and clearly, to call on your support when you need it because you may need support. And those ladies that I mentioned, anytime I went to work and they said, well, you need a team. I said, well, I know who I need. I need these two ladies, and then I can take on the world. And so there's some other folks in here that or may not have been able to join us, but I need you to understand that anything that is really and truly successful in the world needs women. And I've not been able to move anything really without the amazing women around me. I don't, and I know I'm kind of being a little extra deferential and not necessarily taking credit. I'm grateful for what I've gotten, but I also know that I'll tell you, when I came to this work, I was very green and I did not have anything except community peacemaking skills that I had learned through work I had done way back in the day with, believe it or not, with the American program with Jim Brown after the 92 riots and some of the things that I had done as a graduate student back in those days, all the way through. Actually, and I have to raise his name. He just passed in October of 2025. Dr. Akil Bashir, who I had the great fortune of working with in terms of pioneering the work of the Los Angeles model in terms of community public safety and gang intervention and bringing that forward into the work that is done in terms of how we talk about community peace and community safety and what it means to do so and how we build infrastructure around that. And I would greatly now like to, I'm going to stop sharing. And if we have some things for folks that we can do so. There it is. Thank y'all very much. I am grateful for the opportunity to have been here. I hope that you got a glimpse at what we're talking about in terms of authenticity. But what I really want you to think about is how are you showing up? And is all of you there? Is all of you present? And not to get all metaphysical and all that, but is all of you there? And by that I mean I was teaching a session once, and we were talking about the role of the mediator. And someone asked, "Well, the mediator controls and does," and it's like, well, and then you had folks who had just gone through some very powerful academic training. Say, well, no, the mediator doesn't own the process. Ownership, that's a very strong word. And so they, what do you think? And I'm like, well, first off, I was not prepared to answer that question today because that isn't really what we were talking about. But here is what I will say, and I was very honest with them because these are graduate students that are taking a class, a partnership that I will say that working with the folks from Peace and Education, they have some amazing young people, and they put my feet on the fire and said, well, what do you think about this? And I said, it's a great question. Most importantly, we are not we are more caretaker of the process. And as a caretaker, that means that the health and well-being of the parties is at the forefront, and so you hear me again talking about the people, the parties. That's where my focus is. But again, it's also looking within. Am I doing the work on myself so that am I reading? Not just about mediation techniques and practices, but about things of interest to the work. I've read, I'm not going to get too deep, but on things like game theory, meditation and breathing techniques. There's some things that we've done with returns of, like how game theory applies in mediation, and community problem solving. Are there things that I'm afraid that I may not resolve? I've worked with outright racists, with people who were uncomfortable initially, and that, and in other spaces, they didn't want to work with me. But I'm going to say this and then we'll get to your questions. And one particular gentleman who was the Southern California representative for a neo-Nazi group, and they were seeking to have their First Amendment rights supported so that they could have a protest. Their open call was they would call law enforcement agencies and be like, "Hey, how you doing? We'd like to have a protest in the city." When the place said no, they said, "Can you call my buddy James at the Department of Justice and talk to him about that?" And they referred to me as their friend and their buddy because they knew that I would be fair and that I would work within the confines of the rules of engagement. Now, I need you to understand, you all see what I look like, and I'm talking about neo-Nazis preferred working with me. Okay, they knew that I had actually, there was a situation that occurred with them one time in Riverside. This actually is on YouTube. I stepped in front of protesters that wanted to beat them because they were outnumbered, about, 30 to 1. And they said, "Why, you're protecting the neo-Nazis." And I said, "Well, I understand that their presence is violence and this, that, and the other, and I get what you're saying. However, they have a First Amendment right just like you. And while I don't need a First Amendment right when we agree on everything, the whole reason we have a First Amendment is because we're going to disagree. And our opportunity is to not disagree violently. I am not going to get out of your way. And the only reason the police are here is because we've asked y'all to not be the aggressors here today. Now, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I will not be the one moving." And on the same token, I've been in other communities and folks have, "Well, how long are you going to be here? What are you doing? We've heard, y'all have come in here before, these mediators, and nothing has changed. Why would this time be any different?" And my response is, I can't speak about those other times because I wasn't there. I can speak about today and I can speak about how we move forward. And what I offer you all is when you know who you are, you know who you represent, and you know the boundaries that you operate within as a result of that, it's easy to be transparent. It's easy to be authentic. It should be easy, y'all. It should be easy. It should be easy. I don't know that there's another way to say that. But if, however we want to go from here, I'm going to yield my time and space to the presenters. I went just about the time I think I wanted to, so we'd have about a half hour for questions, comments, concerns, issues, announcements. Thank y'all for coming. I am really just well. playfully whelmed, but really overwhelmed at the number of folks that came through this evening. I was like, this is, wow. And I will say that if you were in fact moved or think that, hey, this is something we could use in our community, I am available to travel to you. I am available to have me come through for a small fee and get these things worked out for you, training wise or otherwise. Uh, Renata, Julie, whoever's taking it.
Yes. Thank you, James. I have a question. I have a couple, so I'm going to start and then I'll open it up for everybody else because I'm curious.
Yes.
You always spark curiosity for me. Um, there's the part of us when we're working with communities where we need to really also focus in on that emotional intelligence piece, that self-regulation, self-management.
Uh-huh.
Um, how important would you say is self-awareness for practitioners, especially when they're trying to maintain authenticity, when they're working in a highly charged, emotionally charged community conflict? I know
I,
that's a lot, but
yeah. Well, we go back. I would say it's hugely important because, well, you see, I'm ready to smile. So first off, you got to manage your face. And I am someone for those I got some people have known me, well, back in the last century. I'm not gonna put a number on it, but folks that I see, some folks in the room that knew me in the last century. So I would just say that if you know me, typically my face may reveal, so I have to be present, fully present, so that because like, did you hear what they, what, my face will go, and so I have to be really aware that I'm not that I'm able to keep my composure regardless of what's said, and I can deal with that after, in terms of how my personal response. Now, this is where I throw in the caveat. I am a whole person, and trauma impacts me too. Seeing someone get hurt, I may be moved to tears. It doesn't mean that I'm siding with one side or the other side. You see what you understand? And that folks, and I will own that and say that to them that, look, this is heavy. Uh, I had I guess we'll call it good fortune of having to do some mediation in situations where right after October 7th of a couple of maybe 20, was it 23, with the issues between two countries in just off of Northwest Africa, and the impact that had on local campuses and places around the country, and the blowback around folks really moving towards one side of the issue and not really acknowledging the loss of life on all sides. Let me say it that way. And I typically want to, and I've always, any loss of life is tragic. So that when we begin these situations and having these high impact, for me, when the parties are engaging in that kind of behavior, self-awareness is important because I don't know if they're trying to find a way to push me to show that I'm on their side, if they're trying to utilize the time and space as a way to push an agenda that is not necessarily what we agreed to do. So I have to assess all of that as well. And I like to use what I call smile therapy. So anytime someone comes with something that is really trying to jab at me or one of those, I will return it with a smile. And typically I will use words to describe the behavior, you know, and but I'll share, there was a moment where I was almost not self-aware. and I was responding to a community conflict where, like, I've lost family members to police violence. And so we were responding to some stuff around that, and this person was being a little flippant. And I started walking towards the person because I was actively facilitating, not charting at the time. And for those of you that can't see me, I'm about 6'4", 300 pounds. Very big man. This person was seated and we're in a round, and I started I had been triggered. And so now I'm engaging this person and I'm like, did you hear what you said? Because now I'm talking to them, seeking, and I realize I'm getting closer than I really want to get because I'm having some feelings inside on what they said.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be, and so I caught myself because I don't have no idea what my face looked like. But I think she started getting the picture that she said the wrong thing. And I caught myself and I said, thank you very much. I'm glad that you found, really, she said something that was beyond the pale. I'm not going to repeat it here. And I went and I said, we're going to take a break. We took a break and I had my colleagues with me and they charted and I left the room for a little while, do some breathing and get, back to who I was. And again, we always have the opportunity to care for ourselves first as that mediator. So when something like that pops up, hey, look, okay, I can't, I'm at a point right now where this person triggered some PTSD stuff that's happened for me with family and people have been killed by the police and they being a little flippant. I can't go back right now. I need you to go in and do this. And it's not like a recusal as much as I need you to handle the rest of this for me tonight. Because that person is really not sorry for what they said. And if they say something else, I'm not going to be responsible. And I spent a lot of time devoting my life to peace and alternatives to conflict. And I'd like you all to, but I'm a martial artist too. And I just want folks to know that, I don't choose, I choose peace. And sometimes people try and use a particular measured tone to say the most violent things.
Mhm.
And what I like to do is to remind them that I heard what you said and I know how you meant it.
Yeah.
And, just because you have a smile and you're saying it in a civil way does not mean that you are conveying violence in the room. And we're not going to let that continue. So as a mediator, I would come back in that sort of way, depending upon how it happens. Hopefully I answered your question.
Oh, you did. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I'll give you a few minutes to think because I have another one, James, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
So, what practical ways do you think we as mediators, facilitators, and we're in the community as peace builders can demonstrate integrity when we're working with community members who don't believe that the process we are there to help create,
Uh-huh.
they don't believe that they will work. They believe that
Uh-huh.
they're biased or they're unfair.
Okay.
So you have, any recommended practical ways that we as practitioners can demonstrate our integrity and our intent to be supportive?
Certainly. Well, for starters, since I don't know how many ringers we have in the room, but I'll say I would initially start with a Batna Watna reminder. That's the best alternative to negotiate agreement or
Mhm.
worst alternative. I'd remind them that in terms of practical. And then really what I would go to is I would try to get to the heart of the core of their concern because I'm really listening for what they're not saying. Okay, because this ain't gonna work. I said, well, help me understand why you think that way.
Mhm.
Because while the Botna Watnas, I know I already got that in my back pocket. I could pull that out at any time
Mhm.
and give that to him. But what I don't know is, and see, for me, that's the curiosity of the question, right? Do you, is it because you haven't seen it happen before? Okay, you say it's biased. Help me understand what you mean when you say that. Give me more, because saying it's biased and demonstrating it's biased aren't the same.
Mhm.
So I need you to help me with this. And then, oh, well, so and so is here. And it's like, okay, so so you want to be on the table of excluding people who appear to be committed to a potential resolution? And again, I want to put that back on them as quickly as I can, as they trying to have me carry that burden of this ain't gonna work. I'm not here to fight you over that. You have every right to believe that. But more importantly, I'm not operating from a place of belief. I'm operating from a place of knowledge, from a place of experience, and really a place of understanding. And I would entreat them to move beyond belief because that is a very early stage of understanding what you believe. I get that. Now let's move into something that's tangible, measurable, and practical. Because your belief, I can't touch that. I don't know anything about that other. Even when you describe it, the way you describe it and the way I hear it, there may be differences.
Mhm.
So let's no, and I would also have them, when you see me, what is prospective? What, how would you see this being resolved? If we're going the wrong direction, or if this is biased, what does unbiased look like to you? And the reason I raise that because when I worked for the Community Relations Service, U.S. Department of Justice, many folks would be like, "Well, you're here," and I'm like, I'm ready to go. I don't have to be here. I don't need the credit. Matter of fact, I can give you the stuff and you can do it. All I ask is you let me train the facilitators, let me train the folks so they really know what's happening. I don't have to be here. Now, what is your response? Because my whole point is how we get where is because to me that feels like a blockage
Mhm.
and and so for me as someone who now I'm going to get into I practice qigong, I practice meditation and tai chi chuan. I want things to flow. And so how do we get the flow back into well, even though it's this big community piece, there is an energy, there's a synergy that we're looking for. How we move through that depends on how folks are willing to show up. And it's that, well, it's never worked before. And it's like, okay, I accept that. But that does not mean that it's not going to work this time.
Mhm.
We have different people in the room. We have a different impetus. And I'll give you, in essence, no, I'm not going to do that. That's that. No. So that's how I would answer that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
See
Yes,
somebody else have a question too.
there are a couple of people. Let's see. Martin, and then
Yeah.
oh,
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, James, for your talk this evening.
Thank you.
I think I'm impressed with your philosophy of integrity, authenticity, and how you show up in these conflictual events, some of which are very entrenched.
Uh-huh.
And my question would be, how do you bridge a divide where you have really differences in culture, and how do you bring people who kind of have been for a very long time in a conflictual situation, and you think about some of the conflicts that are going around, the Palestinian and the Israelis, the the Iranian situation, all these entrenched conflicts. Using your approach of authenticity, how do you kind of dig yourself into these type of situations and bring people together to see in the same direction and resolve their problems? Thank you.
Right. First off, sir, thank you for your question. And what I would offer really quickly is that I would really look at first what kind of leverage can be applied, and that's not to get people in the room, but it's really to prevent people from coming. Hopefully you hear what I'm saying. I want to be able to get a fuller analysis of who is engaged, who's involved, and I'll share it this way. I was working with a particular school district, and there was a different cultures between the parent groups, and they were having a parent group meeting, and they had issues with one another. And the main thing that they talked about the other group is they said they're disrespectful. And as I brought them together and I started studying initially, what happened was one group, the meeting would be called to order, and they would get up and go get their snacks. Okay. The other group would get their snacks while the meeting is being called to order and then come sit down.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they were really mad at each other over this. They're disrespectful. How are they not in their seats when the meeting is starting? And the other group is saying, we're going to stop and eat once this thing gets started. So I'm going to get my food and we can start. So, and they did not see that they were valuing the same thing in different ways. And so once I raised that as an issue, they were able to acknowledge that and that ceased being an issue for conflict. However, they found some new stuff. So what I will say is, first off, I like to look at what are the gimmies. And in that situation, like I shared, that was a gimme. So I look for something that I can get from both sides right away that can happen. Or if there's a supportive third party that can make something happen that they all want to happen, have them do that quickly. So once that happens, we now have a shift from the inertia of the old into some mutually agreed upon potential solutions, and one manifests. And now we've got movement in the direction that we wanted. Everybody, and even though it was a gimme, it could be something as simple as a cover over the benches, right? And now there's shade for everybody. Okay, so now we got a place where we can talk in the shade. And so it's just, and I try to keep it as everyday, as close to the people as possible. And so let me say it that way. And now when we get to the larger conflicts that you're talking about that are happening overseas, I've had to deal with the blowback on how that happens here in this country, in terms of how those groups that are here, how they are responding to things that are happening in the old country, whether it be elections or the kind of intractable conflict that's occurring well, I'm sorry, I got to say it. I know that this is going to be on YouTube and other places, but genocide is genocide. And so when these things are present, you have to call it what it is. And as a mediator, this is what I mean by brave space. Many of my colleagues and other folks are going to, may not like the fact that I called it the word that I just used, the G word. And I'm being playful, a little bit. But calling a genocide, calling a spade a spade. Yeah. I'm descended from people that lived through a process of forced migration, attempted enslavement, Jim Crow, or American apartheid. And so to have to try to hold my tongue on seeing something happen exactly like that someplace else, I don't come from those people. So I cannot do that. That's disrespecting my ancestors, disrespecting my teachers. I can't do that. And that is why I have this sort of radical, I don't even call it radical. I mean, I don't think that clean water is a radical thing. I don't think that clean air is radical. I don't think that everybody having food to eat is radical. I don't think that people having a place to stay is radical. I think that as a human being, these are things that people need. I don't think that so. Like now, if someone was thirsty, I live in a desert. Actually, it's Chaparral, but loosely, I live in Los Angeles. And there are places where people wouldn't even give people. People now are hesitant to give water to people. If somebody is hungry, they won't give them food. So these are very basic things. It has nothing to do with me as a mediator. But if the parties are in conflict and one side is thirsty, I don't think I'm taking sides by giving somebody a drink of water. Let me say it that way. So, and I want to keep it small so that way we have an opportunity to address it immediately. And I like to come from the space of if it's small, it's small. If it's big, then it's big. And that's going to take a lot. And how do we handle something really big? We put it into
And smaller
tangible,
pieces.
measurable steps, and we take them one at a time. And I am a person that believes in we're not good at multitasking. We're great at single tasks. So let's do one task at a time and get it done. And as we agree to it, we can begin to see the successes that we have, even though they may be small. And then we celebrate those small successes and we build from those. And then we continue to build out. Hopefully, I answered your question, sir.
We have another question.
Yeah.
I don't want to mess up your name.
Osayandi.
Osayande. Thank you.
Thank you. Having seen you in the community mediating and solving problems and the love that you have for the community, what is your process or how did you keep sane and not burn out mediating when when you can see people clearly going against your suggestions or clearly doing the wrong thing that's going to hurt them? How do you keep your compassion and keep your sanity again without burning out on we mere mortals?
First off, I put my pants on one leg at a time, like everybody else. Uh, one, the other. I mean, just honestly, it's not my solution. It's not mine. And I tell the folks that we're here together, and we are. But the solutions aren't mine. The solutions are the parties. And so I'm not invested in outcomes. That is what part of my liberation is, that I'm not invested in these outcomes. My goal is in helping them not be invested in the outcome, but committed, not invested. Okay? Because if I attach to this outcome, then if it doesn't happen, then there's all this emotion that I have to address and deal with. However, if we're working towards this and we're able to honestly see why things didn't happen and we're doing our evaluation, we're doing the work, we can all agree this wasn't going to work because we conceived the problem wrong. We can go back and fix this though. We can redo it. Excuse me. That is what I'm about. And in terms of replenishing and the rest of that, I mean, I have, 5 children. I have an amazing wife. I have a grandbaby now. So family is first for me. And I have those two ladies that I mentioned earlier, Mildred Dupree de Robles and Linda Ortiz, and some other folks. So I mentioned them because I see them. But oh, is that Tanya? Oh my goodness. So I don't know. So there are people here that I have. There are relatives and there is family, and sometimes your relatives are also family. So you're born with a group. And I've had the great fortune of cultivating a family so that when things get tough, now I'm not violating confidentiality. However, I can talk about things that are tough to me. And there are people that love me and people that hold me up. And I know, as an example, I come from a line of pastors and a long line of pastors and preachers and deacon boards in the Christian tradition. And there was when I had a very difficult assignment where it was really intractable, lots of loss of life. The pastors in the family went to their churches and said, "We need you to pray for our son. We need y'all to hold him up." So I know that outside of my great grandmother and great great grandmother and all those prayers that my life has been an answer for, that there are still people holding me in the light that are helping me that you haven't met, that you don't know, that want to see good outcomes for everything that I touch. And I am humbled that I have been trained to give our community what is needed from me to the best of my ability. Hopefully, I answered your question.
Well, James, you have two more questions.
Okay,
So Erica and then Mary Grace.
I tried.
Hello, thank you so much for your wisdom. I've really enjoyed everything that you've shared tonight. My question for you, and I work in a space that is different from community
Uh-huh.
mediation, different from international mediation. I'm involved in workplace conflict, and I don't have the luxury. I call it a luxury to be able to practice as a mediator. In my role, I don't have the luxury of being an impartial mediator. I'm curious to know how you tackle mediations where parties don't seem to be acting in good faith.
I've had that happen a time or two. So one situation, community, and you'll maybe appreciate this. We were working towards a resolution, and this was multi-party, so about 6, 7, 8 parties. 5 of those parties were actively trying to sabotage the work, and they wanted to say that I was the problem. And as I saw it coming, because again, I'm talking to everybody as a mediator, all I did was I took the documentation because I take notes. We take notes every meeting. And so I said, you know what? Some things have not been getting done. And, we had agreed that some things were going to get done. Here are the meeting notes. And here is me on X date and X date and X date and X date saying X, Y, and Z. And here's me saying the same thing at the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting. Because what we're not going to do is use the name of James Williams III and say that tangible, measurable outcomes were not identified and progress was not made on them. That's what we're not going to say. So someone is going to own the fact that these things did not get done and James Williams III's name is not among them. So that is one way that I have done it. Another way would be to really, within the confines of the work, just go to that party when we're doing our one-on-ones or our pre-work or wherever we are in the process, and we can have a one-on-one conversation with that party or parties. Again, in the role of mediator, or even in the role of a problem solver, or slightly different if it's more of a ombuds role. But really, it's, are you in this for real? Is this good faith? Are you in this for good? Are you in good faith reasoning? Some things that you've said have given me questions. And in my role, particularly, that's one of the reasons why I like mediation, is that I'm a third party independent. That independence comes up as like, I'm getting the feeling that I don't need to be present because you're not really appearing to be in good faith.
You know what? You know what, James? I agree with you there. And I think
Okay.
for me as a professional and the work that I do,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to have a crossover in the methods that mediators use
Okay. Okay.
in other spaces. So I like what your response, you answered my question, and I think it just validated for me the the efforts I'm making to incorporate that type of approach, even when I'm not considered neutral. I feel like, talking to
Mm-hmm.
people as humans and treating them like the adults that they are could also be effective.
Yeah,
But I know that's a conversation for a different day. I'll let Mary Grace ask her
certainly.
question, but
And
I would love to pick your brain some more.
well, we'll get to that. That's possible. The other piece I want to add to end that, and then we'll get to Mary Grace's question, is it's okay to use your words to describe the behavior that you see. A lot of times when people I'll ask them, did you hear what you just asked? Would you mind repeating that aloud again to yourself? Whether this is a one-on-one interaction or preferably, again, it's a one-on-one, but just to help them see that, do you hear what you just said? I don't, did you mean what it meant? Maybe I misheard you because it sounded like you said, and so that's another way that I have found very engaging is when people engage in not being in good faith and you describe that behavior out loud and ask them to repeat what they said again, and they have to now really own it in the nude, I won't say, yeah, the naked space, and it just has to. So, okay, so I also use music to both say out this question. Here's what there's a wonderful artist named Tracy Chapman who had this song, and she said, "There is fiction in the space between us." Okay, I ain't saying you lying. I'm just saying that between us there's fiction, and it left your mouth and it came to my ears, and
Yes.
yeah. So it's like, hey, however you want to deal with that, you deal with that. But I just need you to know that I know it's fiction. And we're supposed to be dealing in nonfiction. Thank you, Mary Grace.
I will try and make this quick. Thank you. Thank you for what you bring. The piece of living and practicing from your own values, that piece where you really know yourself and your
Uh-huh.
values, is so strong. And so I'm bringing another problem child to the room. How do you handle when you become the target as the mediator, when you become the target because, and I'm talking about a power imbalance here, when you start to give voice to somebody who has not had a voice at the
Uh-huh.
table
Uh-huh.
and you're seen as a threat
By the
how,
powerful side?
by the powerful. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll humbly offer this. That's what the whole purpose of mediation is about balancing out the power imbalance. Again, I come from a transformative mediation space, which means that when the parties leave us, the nature of their relationship is going to be different than it was when we started. Not necessarily better, not worse. I mean, I'm not putting any valuative on how the relationship is changed, but it's going to be different. And again, if I'm aiding one party, because like if it's an institution or a structure, governmental structure, and they're meeting with community organizations, And I spend the work helping them identify their concerns and their issues and getting all that. And then we go to mediation. Yes, that's going to be seen as a threat, which is, and I'm not going to even jump away from this. Why most organizations that we don't even pay attention to, we arbitrate our lives away. It's in the end of most of our end user legal agreements. Licensing and our we agree to arbitration to be able to use most of the products that we use. Okay, that's not fair because, but I'm not going to get into that. I believe in the people. I believe in mediation. I more than believe in that. I know that mediation works. And I know that it's when the parties agree. But here's the thing about power, right? Power is only useful when it's applied. Okay, so you can't just hold power and think that you have it. It has to be applied. So even though they may be in a position, that means that there's an appeal to authority. So that means that it's an implied power. It's not even real power. Okay, so we have to really look at what power is more fully. And particularly as a mediator, they can come at me all they want to. I'm about the process. If you violate the process, that means you're trying to violate something that I have, I am supposed to be working with. And I hold the process sacrosanct. And because and I've had to do so. I'll give you an example in situations where, in the middle of a mayor's race, I'm working to get a resolution done, and both mayoral candidates are trying to come be seen with us and what we're doing, so that they can take credit for what's happening. And I had to talk to one party and remind them that this is about this situation, not about you. You can talk about these things. Well, and I'm gonna leave it at that because we're not really getting into the real, and this is why I talked with the brother's question earlier about leverage. As a mediator, they want to try and apply leverage to you, and you have to be able to say that, no, I'm the fulcrum. There is no leverage that you can apply against me. All you can do is try and use your lever to balance or hold itself upright. And hopefully I didn't get too off into the math on that, but the analogy. But I lean in
No, I
strong.
hear it. I hear that call to be in your center and be strong in your center and
Yes.
say, here's what I'm about, here's what I'm here for. Everything else can just go.
And
Hold
ultimately,
strong for that.
look, if y'all don't want me here, I could go. I'm ready. I'm ready. Okay, you okay? And and so where I worked previously, I had that freedom, but still, if it happened again, we'd have to go out there. Now that I'm an independent, it's a little differently, and people feel that because they're paying you that means something. No, it don't. No, look, and I'll it, when you need, I'll send the money back. This ain't about money. We're about the people. We're about I've done this for free before. So the fact that you're paying me is not a measure of my value. I am providing you with a service. I am not a servant. And so even though you may sit in a position of power that you perceive, and we have to be clear on that you perceive you sit in a position of power. You ain't asked me how I felt about how that situation is perceived. And excuse me for my colloquial use of the language, but sometimes
But it's
I
the
reckon,
truth, James. It's the absolute truth.
And
and
it's that strength that you call. It's like you cannot have the mediation. I have the mediation. And you have to hold, like you said, protect the process earlier.
yeah, I'm holding space. That's what
Mhm.
I'm supposed to do. And if you're infringing on the boundaries, I have to remind you of what's that happens. And there are there is a response that comes from those incursions. And that's the best way to say that. But most
Thanks.
importantly, I have agency as a mediator. Okay, the law of 2 feet applies to me too. Okay, this is not, I'm starting, you don't want me here? Okay, let's see if we can get you another mediator. Let's see what we can do. But I do want you to understand that we've all been trained the same. So whoever else comes back here is going to be asking similar questions, maybe not the same question, but when it gets to this issue, it's going to come back. So you may want to look for how you want to deal with that. That's all I'm saying.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd love to hear the feedback.
Well, you know me, Mary Grace. We've had that same experience in our city with our health equities
Yes,
project.
ma'am.
And it comes down to, as James said earlier, how authentic are you? Where are your values? And how do you present that in the face of politics, in the face of cultural differences, and in the face of entrenched conflict? You never waver away from your true self. That's what that authenticity is.
Right.
You stay true to self.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Go ahead.
I think as the mediator, you think that maybe, well, this is between them, that they're never going to come after you when they see what's happening in the room as a threat, but that's part of their play, right? That's part of the power they're used to playing.
Mm-hmm.
So
remember,
that-
divide and conquer has been used a very long time. All you got to do is see it for what it is, call it for what it is. And remember,
James, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's the challenge for a lot of up and coming practitioners. They are uncomfortable with calling a spade a spade.
well, then you go again. I am not here. What is the phrase? I'm here to aid the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I'm here to comfort the afflicted. Yeah, I'm here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Our role is not to be one where we are perpetuating or propagating harm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm very clear about transformation. I'm very clear. Some got to change. And I'm not saying this as I have a bias or I have an agenda. However, the whole reason we're here is because things weren't working the way that they were. And that's why we're here.
Exactly.
I
You
see
have
that.
one other question from Rachel.
Okay.
Hi, James. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. This is more so of a comment, not so much of a question. But I do family mediation, and I get that sometimes parties can come up against a mediator. I actually had that experience recently with a Black male, and I was co-mediating with an attorney where she was actually observing, but we're both female mediators.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues he had was with Black women. And so he kind of addressed it in mediation multiple times. And so at this point, I said, I'm gonna have to call a caucus. So in the caucus, I was able to acknowledge how he felt. He has been let down by, African American women all his life, especially particularly his mother growing up, and then his relationship had failed. And so he felt that because he was the only Black male in the room, that we were ganging up on him versus him looking at us as professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So giving him that space to be able to express himself freely, one-on-one. Of course, we did the caucus with the other party. The party didn't have anything to share along those lines. But just letting him have that space to kind of bleed out his injury, his wounds that he have. I felt when we went back into the main room in the mediation, it was more balanced because he was able to kind of get all of the, flush all that out, and then
There you
actually
go.
being able to let him know this is a process, right? This is a process. And again, like you mentioned earlier, your professionalism, your credentials, why you're here, why you're showing up. I'm not here as a gang against this black male, so having that conversation, calling it out, calling it for what it is, and acknowledging his feelings, we were able to kind of get back on track in the mediation. But it happens at times. You won't think that, when we first came into the mediation, he already had his implicit biases. Just looking at me as a black woman, looking at the co-mediator as a black woman, he already was ready to fire throughout the whole mediation. So I can see how if there is an elephant in the room and you're constantly seeing that, and it's like you can't get past anything because he's throwing these darts at you directly. You got to call it out. And so what I did, we just kind of did that caucus. And for me, caucusing work, I don't caucus all the time, but when it gets to the point where it's like someone is feeling slighted because there's women in the room and minimizing our level of professionalism or credentials, then I have a problem. But thank you, and thank you so much for your expertise tonight. Appreciate it.
So very briefly, when folks are questioning the credentials and the rest of it, I think that you did the appropriate thing in terms of breaking into a caucus. But also, there's something I'm going to share. This goes back, only 5,000-6,000 years. There's called the Teachings of Ptahhotep. It's one of the oldest complete books in the world. It was revised about 3546 BCE. And in it, one of the things that it talks about is when someone is pouring their heart out, just let them pour it out. They may not get everything, but they want to be listened to. They want to be heard. And so what really happened was you went into this mediation not knowing that he had this fire burning under him for black women. And as the process unfolded, you began to notice the pattern. You addressed it, allowed him to share and release it. And now you can come back and he's clear. And you're clear. And much of that has been addressed. However, I would say he's still going to have some issues that he's going to have to deal with just because it didn't pop up anymore or hasn't with y'all. It may pop up again someplace else until that gets healed. And it might even,
Absolutely.
so that's, very powerful to be able to, in those situations, particularly when it's about, relationship, because that's a transition. And with any transition, what we want to look at is how do we release? Because it's a transition. How are we letting go? How are we moving forward? But before we're moving forward, we have to assess where we are. And part of that may be in the process of the mediation going forward is he might need some assistance. And one of the things that I talk about is, I can handle like, a little sink stoppage at my house, but when, stuff backs up, I call a professional. I get the plumber. Or if something happens to my sliding glass door here, I have a handyman, or something happens to my fence, I get a professional. Because it's beyond my capabilities, I get the help that I need. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm having some issues relating to women in this particular way. Let me talk to someone who deals with these issues every day, see if I can get some help. And we have, community groups like NAMI and other folks that do that real work to help get that done, as well as some foundations. And so and I say that to say that my bachelor's degree is in psychology, and I spent a lot of time uh, training therapists back when in my youth. So I take a real point of not bringing that to the mediation, but in saying to them, you know, based on our conversation, perhaps you may, and then leave it to them to do what they will with it, depending on the kind of rapport and camaraderie that we have developed over the course of that time. Like I said, my goal is to listen so well that when they hear me talk, it's as if they're listening to their own thoughts back and they're coming with I was thinking about doing that. Hey, Well, what do you think about that? Why haven't you done that? Is the larger question. And give them, because real courage is what's needed in a lot of these situations. And so we help where we can and listen mostly. Hey, Cabrina, hey, what's happening, sis? Good to see you. I just not seen. Oh my goodness, wow! Y'all don't know we have been blessed with some amazing people in this room. I don't even really need. I'm grateful that I'm talking, but wow. Okay, just some amazing people I've had the good fortune of working with in the room. A lot of these amazing, like I said, amazing women. Cabrina's another one of them. So just again, uh, as it being Women's History Month, I thought it appropriate because any good thing that has ever come to me I don't know if Tanya Diggs is still in here as well, but has come to me through the the brilliant work of women. So the fact that I'm here tonight because of the grace of and of peace and education and the work of Renata and Julie, who I really admire what they've done and are doing in community. Anything I can do to help them, they know I'm a phone call away.